I want to go across now first to Mr. Enram and get his sense. You've heard a very elaborate explanation from Veer Sanghvi. I want your sense on the defense that's been put forth by Mr. Sanghvi and by Barkhada. Do you believe, after having heard what they've said, these are acceptable explanations? Mr. Ram.
Not at all. I think it is very clear to me, particularly after hearing these explanations, that what they did was completely out of line, both of them. And after I heard Barkhada's very, very disappointing, I would say pathetic performance, disastrous performance last night in that debate, where she lost her cool, she was intolerant, she kept proclaiming, she kept attacking without any kind of remorse. I would make a distinction between her response and Veer's. We've heard him carefully, but I'm not convinced at all. First, on the question of stringing your sources along. We know what that means, and in this case, the information was worth nothing. But he says, I didn't pass on any messages. I'm not going to ask the Congress, but here is something that is significant, I think, in the transcript, where Meera Radia says, she sort of reported this to Kanimuri, and she says she conveys Kanimuri's thanks, saying, so she wants to thank you personally for this, for doing this favor, because apparently there's some kind of outcome at that point, or at least it looked that way to Meera Radia. That, I think, is a serious transgression of the line of what a journalist should be doing. And secondly, in the case of Veer Sanghvi, the so-called stringing along, which I don't buy, resulted in nothing. It was for nothing. Apropos what? For what purpose? It was absolutely. He says, I'm not a daily journalist working for a daily newspaper. I wasn't writing for every day, and therefore it was completely useless information. And yet, Meera Radia makes people in the DMK, from what the transcript says or reveals, come away with the impression that Veer Sanghvi has been instrumental in this, has helped us deliver this outcome or some kind of progress towards that outcome. That, I think, is very serious. As for the article, the column that appeared the very next day after Veer asked Meera Radia what kind of story she wants him to do on the gas dispute between the two brothers, I think it's quite reasonable for people to say it's a national resource. It can't be left to some family arrangement and so on. But it is not all right for you to ask somebody, what should I say? And then, from what he says, it's his own view. I take him at his word on that. But the coincidence is too strong, and people are going to draw the wrong inference. And as for the discussion of how we do the interview with Mukesh Ambani, that is, I think, appalling, because he clearly says, I'll come without a camera, I'll do it. It's like an interviewer coaching the source. He says it's to put the person being interviewed at ease, but it looks terrible in this transcript. So I'm afraid, in the case of both, we'll discuss Barkha after we hear the transcripts, I guess. But in the case of both, they're completely out of line. And my verdict is the BBC wouldn't tolerate it. What I said in the current discussion, the BBC wouldn't tolerate it. The Financial Times wouldn't tolerate it. The New York Times wouldn't tolerate it. So why should we not raise the bar? Why should we tolerate this and say that this is acceptable journalism? Because the whole thing hinges on whether you believe that this was really this so-called stringing along was legitimate or not. And to me, it's a serious transgression of professional norms. This should not be done.
You're calling this a serious transgression of professional norms. You're saying that defense is completely out of line. You're indicating that action should be taken against the guilty journalist.